cloud of ancient stardust collapses, a young sun ignites, worlds collide, oceans gather, and somewhere within the chemistry of a restless planet, matter learns how to remember itself. From the first fragile cells to forests, dinosaurs, mass extinctions, human civilization, and Earth's distant final days. This is the story of a world that never stops changing. Alike a subscription or a share helps this long scientific journey reach others who enjoy calm, immersive stories of deep time. Thank you for spending part of the day or night here. What time is it where this story is being heard, and from which part of the world a comment can mark that small human moment against billions of years of planetary history? Settle into the slow rhythm of oceans, stone, evolution, and stars. The complete history of Earth and life begins now, long before oceans, forests, or even a stable surface exist. Earth begins as part of a cold and nearly invisible cloud drifting through one arm of the Milky Way. The cloud contains mostly hydrogen and helium, along with tiny grains of silicate metal, carbon compounds, and ice inherited from older generations of stars. Those older stars have already lived and died, forging many of the heavier elements that later become rock, air, water, and living tissue. Gravity slowly gathers part of the cloud inward. The collapse may be encouraged by turbulence, by the pressure of nearby stellar activity, or by the ordinary instability of a dense region that has become too massive to remain suspended. Whatever the first disturbance, the material begins to fall toward a common center. As it contracts, it spins faster, and the cloud flattens into a broad disk. At the center, pressure and temperature rise until the young sun forms. Around it, a thin rotating plane of gas and dust becomes the construction ground of the planets. The solar system is not assembled from clean, orderly rings. It grows through countless collisions in a disk filled with fragments moving at different speeds. Close to the sun, heat prevents most water and other volatile substances from remaining frozen. The inner disk is therefore dominated by metal and rocky minerals. Farther out, where temperatures are lower, ice becomes abundant and adds greatly to the amount of solid material available. Dust grains collide and sometimes stick through weak electrical forces. Clusters become pebbles. Pebbles gather into larger bodies, and gravity begins to strengthen the process. Once an object reaches sufficient size, it pulls surrounding debris toward itself, sweeping a widening path through the disk. Many of these growing bodies are planetesimals, small worlds ranging from modest rocks to objects hundreds of kilometers across. They do not all travel peacefully in separate lanes. Their paths cross, their speeds change, and the growing planets disturb one another. The young solar system becomes a place of repeated impact, fragmentation, melting, and renewed assembly. Earth emerges from this long competition. It is not born in a single event, but built over millions of years from many bodies that collide and merge. Each impact converts motion into heat. Radioactive elements add further warmth, and pressure rises as the planet grows. Much of the young Earth melts, at least in broad regions and perhaps across nearly the entire surface. In this molten state, materials separate according to density. Heavy iron and nickel sink inward, gathering into a metallic core. Lighter silicate rock remains above, forming the mantle and the earliest crust. This separation, known as differentiation, establishes the basic layered structure that still defines the planet. It also begins a long chemical sorting process, leaving some elements concentrated near the surface, while others disappear into depths that remain inaccessible for almost all of Earth's history. The descent of metal releases additional heat, keeping the interior active. Earth is already becoming more than a simple sphere of stone. It is developing an engine within, one that will later power volcanism, magnetic protection, and the slow movement of continents. The surface, however, remains unstable. Newly formed crust is repeatedly broken, buried, and remelted. Volcanoes release gases trapped in the interior, producing an early atmosphere unlike the modern one. Water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen compounds, sulfur gases, and other materials escape from molten rock. Some water is delivered in the minerals of the bodies that build Earth, and more may arrive through later impacts from water-rich asteroids. Comets may contribute a smaller share. The exact balance remains uncertain, but water does not need to come from a single source. It is assembled with the planet, released from its interior, and supplemented from space. During this early age, another growing world moves near Earth. It is often described as roughly the size of Mars, though its precise mass, speed, and path remain subjects of continuing study. This body, commonly called Theia, collides with the young Earth in one of the final giant impacts of planetary formation. The event is immense, but it is not best understood as a simple blow that knocks a piece away. Computer models suggest a range of possible encounters. In some, the impact is glancing. In others, the two bodies mix more thoroughly. In several modern versions, Earth spins rapidly after the collision, and a hot disk of vaporized and molten rock spreads around it. The details differ, yet the central result remains strong material placed into orbit gradually gathers to form the Moon. The new satellite is much closer to Earth than it is today. It appears larger in the sky, and its gravitational pull produces powerful tides in any liquid or partly molten material at the surface. Over time, tidal interactions transfer rotational energy from Earth to the Moon. Earth's day lengthens, while the Moon slowly moves outward. That movement continues in the present, although at a rate shaped by the changing arrangement of oceans and continents. The impact also leaves Earth profoundly heated. A global or near-global magma ocean may cover the surface. Rock vapor condenses, molten layers cool, and the first crust forms only to be disrupted again. The Moon experiences a similar early history, with extensive melting and a surface that records impact scars long after Earth's more active geology erases most of its own. The Moon becomes a kind of distant archive, preserving evidence of the violent environment shared by both worlds. Earth keeps fewer direct records from this time because its crust is recycled, altered, and buried. Even so, tiny mineral grains survive. Ancient zircons found within younger rocks contain clues that liquid water and relatively cool crust may exist surprisingly early, perhaps within the first few 100 million years after formation. These grains do not reveal a calm world. They reveal that cooling can occur between episodes of destruction. Rain may fall, oceans may gather, impacts may boil portions of them away, and water may return as the atmosphere cools again. The Hadean Earth is therefore not necessarily a single continuous inferno. It is a changing world, moving between molten conditions, crust formation, bombardment, vapor, and liquid water. Large impacts remain common. Some excavate deep basins. Others melt broad regions or add new material. The idea of one sharply defined late bombardment is debated, but there is no doubt that the young inner solar system contains far more wandering debris than it does later. Jupiter and the other giant planets influence the paths of smaller bodies, scattering some outward and sending others inward. Earth grows while the architecture of the entire solar system is still settling. Through these collisions, the planet gains not only mass but chemical variety. Carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, and water-bearing minerals arrive in uneven mixtures. Much is lost again to heat or space. Much is drawn into the mantle. Some remains near the surface, where later cycles of rock, ocean, and atmosphere will make it available to life. At this stage, life does not yet appear. The planet is preparing the conditions from which life may eventually emerge. Its iron core is forming, its rocky mantle is convecting, its crust is repeatedly renewed, its atmosphere is accumulating from volcanic gases and impact-delivered materials. Its moon is stabilizing the system in ways that may influence Earth's long-term rotational and climatic behavior, though the importance of that influence is still studied. Each feature arises from violence, but together they begin to produce continuity. This is the first quiet paradox in Earth's history. A habitable world does not begin in peace. It begins through collapse, heat, collision, and loss. The same impacts that threaten to sterilize the surface also build the planet and deliver essential materials. The same melting that destroys early crust allows the interior to separate into layers. The same giant collision that remakes Earth also creates the Moon, a companion that will remain through nearly all later chapters of life. By the end of this opening age, Earth is still alien. The Sun is fainter than it becomes later. The atmosphere lacks breathable oxygen. The surface is dark with volcanic rock, broken by impacts and glowing eruptions. Yet beneath the disorder, the main structure is in place. A metallic heart turns below a deep mantle. A crust begins to endure. Water gathers in vapor and liquid form. The moon circles overhead. The planet has crossed the first threshold. From scattered dust to a world capable of remembering its own past in stone. After the violence of planetary assembly, Earth begins a slower transformation. The surface is still hot, unstable, and frequently renewed by impact and volcanism, yet heat is no longer accumulating as rapidly as before. Energy escapes into space. Vapor in the atmosphere cools, clouds thicken, and rain begins to fall over dark volcanic ground. Some of that rain may return immediately to steam when it touches hot rock. Some gathers in hollows and basins, over long intervals. The balance shifts toward lasting liquid water. The first oceans do not appear in a single quiet moment. They form, evaporate in places, condense again, and deepen as the planet continues to cool. Water also circulates through cracks in the crust, reacts with minerals, and returns through volcanic systems. From the beginning, the ocean is not only a body of water, it is part of a moving chemical network linking atmosphere, surface, crust, and interior. The air above it contains little or no free oxygen. Carbon dioxide, nitrogen, water vapor, sulfur compounds, and other volcanic gases dominate. Sunlight is weaker than it becomes in later ages, yet the atmosphere may trap enough heat to keep much of the surface from freezing. Greenhouse gases help compensate for the faint young sun. At the same time, carbon dioxide dissolves into rain and seawater, making them chemically active. Water reacts with exposed rock, breaking minerals apart and carrying dissolved material toward the sea. This weathering slowly removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Some carbon becomes locked into minerals, while some is transported into ocean sediments. The process is imperfect and irregular, but it establishes one of Earth's most enduring forms of climate control. When volcanic activity releases more carbon dioxide, warming can increase. When weathering removes more, cooling can follow. The balance shifts over immense spans of time, guided by rainfall, temperature, rock exposure, and the movement of the crust. The earliest crust differs from the continents of the present. Much of it is likely dark. Dense basalt formed from mantle melts. Thin plates of this rock spread across the surface, fracture, and sink or melt again. Small patches of lighter crust may form when basaltic material is repeatedly melted, altered by water and chemically separated. These more buoyant rocks resist sinking and may become the first durable nuclei of continents. The exact timing of stable continental crust remains uncertain, because almost all rock from this age has been destroyed or transformed. Ancient zircons suggest that cool surface conditions and silica-rich crust exist very early, but they cannot reveal the full pattern of the planet. Earth's memory is fragmentary because the machinery that creates continents also erases their beginnings. Beneath the crust, the mantle remains intensely hot. Although solid on most scales, it flows slowly over geological time. Hotter material becomes buoyant and rises. Cooler material near the surface becomes denser and tends to descend. This circulation, called mantle convection, carries heat outward from the deep interior. It does not behave like rapidly boiling water. Rock moves by tiny amounts each year, yet over millions of years those motions reshape the planet. Rising mantle can stretch and thin the crust, allowing magma to reach the surface. Cooling crust can founder into the mantle. These early patterns may resemble plate tectonics, but they may also differ greatly from the system operating today. Modern plate tectonics divides Earth's outer shell into rigid plates that move over the softer mantle beneath them. New oceanic crust forms at spreading ridges. Old oceanic crust sinks at subduction zones. Where one plate bends and descends beneath another, continents ride within this shifting mosaic. On the young Earth, however, the crust is hotter, thinner, and perhaps less rigid. Some regions may operate through short episodes of subduction, while others remain covered by a stagnant lid that breaks only locally. Large mantle plumes may push upward, melt the crust, and create temporary plate boundaries. The transition into sustained global plate tectonics is one of the major unresolved questions in Earth science. Evidence has been altered by billions of years of metamorphism, erosion, and recycling. Some interpretations place the beginnings very early, while others suggest that the modern style develops gradually and becomes widespread much later. What remains clear is that Earth does not stay sealed beneath an unmoving shell. Its interior and surface exchange material, and that exchange becomes central to the planet's long habitability. Water plays a decisive role. When it enters hot rock, it changes minerals and lowers the temperature at which parts of the mantle can melt. Water also weakens rock, making deformation easier, at descending boundaries. Hydrated crust carries water and other volatile substances into the mantle. Some are released at depth, helping generate magma that rises to feed volcanic arcs. This creates a circulation in which water enters the crust at the ocean floor, travels downward with sinking rock, and returns through volcanism. Not all of it returns immediately. Some is stored in mantle minerals for very long periods. The ocean is therefore connected to a hidden reservoir far below the surface. Its volume changes through geological time, but the claim that it simply drains away in one steady direction is too simple. Water moves both into and out of the mantle, and the balance depends on temperature, tectonic style, and the chemistry of deep rock. The ocean itself is chemically harsh. Hot water flowing through new crust dissolves metals and carries them back toward the seafloor. At hydrothermal vents, mineral-rich fluids meet cooler seawater and deposit iron, sulfur, copper, zinc, and other elements. These reactions create steep differences in temperature and chemistry. Such gradients later become important to ideas about the origin of life, because they provide concentrated energy and catalytic mineral surfaces. Yet the early ocean cannot be described with a single composition. Conditions vary from shallow volcanic pools to deep basins, from acidic rain-affected regions to alkaline fluids circulating through altered mantle rock. Salinity may differ from place to place and change through time. The planet offers many chemical environments rather than one uniform global laboratory. As rain and rivers wear down newly formed land, sediments collect along coasts and on the ocean floor, clay minerals trap ions and organic molecules, carbonate minerals store carbon, iron reacts with sulfur and other compounds. Every grain moved from land to sea becomes part of a slow planetary sorting system. If tectonic recycling is active, sediments are eventually buried, heated, and transformed. Some melt, some return to the surface through volcanoes, some descend into the deep mantle. This cycling stabilizes the supply of elements near the surface and prevents the ocean and atmosphere from evolving independently of the interior. The metallic core is changing as well. Heat escaping from the core drives motion in electrically conducting liquid iron. Combined with Earth's rotation, this motion can generate a magnetic field through a process known as the geodynamo. The exact strength and continuity of the earliest field remain uncertain, but ancient minerals preserve evidence that a magnetic field exists deep in Earth's past. This field extends into space and interacts with charged particles from the Sun. It does not form an absolute shield, and an atmosphere can survive without a strong magnetic field under some conditions. Yet it helps shape the escape of particles and protects the upper atmosphere from direct solar interaction. More importantly, the core, mantle, crust, ocean, and atmosphere are no longer separate stories. They are parts of one coupled planet. Heat from formation and radioactive decay drives the mantle. Mantle motion creates crust and volcanic gases. Rain and oceans alter that crust. Sediments and water return downward. The core produces a magnetic environment around the whole system. Each layer changes the others, and none remains fixed. The young Earth is still dangerous. Impacts continue. Volcanoes are widespread, the atmosphere is unbreathable, and the sea contains dissolved metals that would be toxic to most modern organisms. Yet habitability does not require comfort. It requires persistence, energy, liquid water, useful chemistry, and enough stability for complex reactions to continue. By the end of this stage, Earth possesses all of these in scattered and changing forms. Oceans remain on the surface. Rock circulates between depth and light. Carbon moves through air, water, and mineral. The planet has begun to regulate itself. Not with intention, but through feedbacks born from physics and chemistry. Beneath a dim young sun, the first long-lived environments are opening, and within them matter is approaching a new threshold. Life does not arrive on the young Earth as a finished cell. It emerges, if it emerges at all, through a long sequence of chemical steps whose exact order remains unknown. The planet now offers liquid water, volcanic heat, mineral surfaces, sunlight, storms, and constant movement between atmosphere, ocean, crust, and mantle. These conditions create countless places where simple molecule can form, break apart, and combine again. Carbon dioxide, nitrogen compounds, hydrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, metals, and water circulate through sharply different environments. Some are hot and acidic, others cool and alkaline, and many pass through cycles of wetness and drying. Across all of them, energy flows. And wherever energy flows through matter, chemistry can be pushed away from equilibrium. That movement away from chemical stillness is essential. Life is an organized process that uses energy to maintain itself, repair itself, and eventually reproduce. Before biology exists, chemistry must begin doing something similar. The first challenge is concentration. Organic molecules can form in the atmosphere, around volcanic gases, within meteorites, and through interactions between water and rock. Yet an open ocean is vast, and useful molecules dispersed through it become too dilute to react efficiently. local environments solve part of this problem. Shallow pools can evaporate, porous minerals can trap compounds in tiny chambers, ice can exclude impurities into narrow liquid channels, hydrothermal systems can circulate fluids through microscopic cracks. Each setting concentrates material and brings molecules into repeated contact. None is confirmed as the single birthplace of life, and different environments may contribute different stages. Some reactions may begin near the seafloor, while later steps occur in surface pools or volcanic fields. The origin of life may be less like one isolated spark and more like a network of chemical pathways gradually becoming linked. Hydrothermal vents offer one possible starting place. At the ocean floor, water enters fractured rock, reacts with minerals, and returns carrying dissolved chemicals. In alkaline vent systems, the fluids can be rich in hydrogen and pass through mineral walls filled with tiny pores. Across those walls, differences in acidity and electrical charge arise naturally. Modern cells also use gradients across membranes to store and release energy. This does not prove that life begins at vents, but it shows that geology can create an energy system resembling one of biology's deepest mechanisms. Iron and sulfur minerals may also encourage reactions by holding molecules in place and helping electrons move between them. In darkness beneath the sea, chemical energy is available without sunlight. Other researchers focus on land, where pools near volcanic regions repeatedly fill and dry. Wet and dry cycles can drive a different kind of chemistry. When water evaporates, dissolved molecules become concentrated. Some link into longer chains because reactions that are difficult in abundant water become easier as water is removed. Rain or geyser activity can refill the pool, allowing products to mix and enter another cycle. Thousands of repetitions create opportunities for selection before true biological evolution begins. Molecules that survive heat, resist breakdown, or help make copies of similar molecules become more common within the local system. This is not yet natural selection in the full biological sense, but it begins to resemble it. The chemistry starts to preserve successful patterns. Among the most important patterns is the ability to store information. Modern life uses DNA for long-term genetic memory and proteins for much of its chemical work. Their dependence on one another creates a difficult question about which appears first. RNA offers a possible bridge. Like DNA, it can carry information in a sequence of chemical units. Like some proteins, certain RNA molecules can fold into shapes that speed up reactions. Such catalytic RNA is called a ribozyme in an early RNA world, or in a mixed system containing several kinds of polymers. Molecules that make imperfect copies of themselves could begin to evolve. Perfect copying is unnecessary at first. Small errors create variation, and a few may improve stability, speed, or access to raw material. Once copying with variation begins, chemistry gains a primitive form of memory. The past starts influencing which molecules exist in the future. Yet RNA is delicate, and its building blocks are not easy to assemble under all natural conditions. This keeps the RNA world a strong hypothesis rather than a completed explanation. Perhaps simpler informational molecules come first. Perhaps short peptides, the small relatives of proteins, assist RNA from the beginning. Perhaps metabolism appears before genetics, with networks of mineral-guided reactions becoming enclosed only later. The boundary between these possibilities remains open because the earliest direct evidence has vanished. Precellular molecules leave almost no fossil trace, so their history must be reconstructed from laboratory chemistry, ancient rocks, and shared features of modern organisms. Another essential step is enclosure. Fatty molecules have a useful property. One end interacts readily with water, while the other avoids it. In water, they can arrange themselves into sheets, droplets, and hollow spheres. These structures form spontaneously under suitable conditions, creating an inside and an outside. It keeps useful molecules close together, slows their loss, and allows chemical differences to develop across the boundary. A membrane alone is not alive. It may grow, divide when disturbed, and trap compounds, but it has no reliable inheritance. Still, when membranes enclose molecules that copy or assist one another, a new level of organization appears. Compartments with effective chemical systems persist, while unstable ones disappear. Selection now acts not only on individual molecules but on whole protocells. The earliest protocells are probably leaky and fragile. Modern membranes are highly controlled, but primitive membranes may need to let nutrients pass freely. This weakness lets small molecules enter, while larger informational chains remain trapped inside. Over time, chemical systems that strengthen the membrane, regulate its growth, or coordinate division gain an advantage. The components begin to depend on one another. Information helps produce catalysts. Catalysts speed reactions. Reactions supply new building blocks. Membranes keep the system together. No single molecule carries the full burden of life. The network as a whole becomes increasingly lifelike. Energy remains central throughout this transition. Every synthesis requires chemical power. Ultraviolet light can energize surface reactions, though it can also destroy fragile molecules. Lightning can produce reactive compounds in the atmosphere. Radioactive minerals may contribute local energy, but probably not one universal setting. Heat from magma and chemical reactions between water and fresh rock offer more continuous sources. Natural gradients between hot and cold, acidic and alkaline, oxidized and reduced, drive electrons through reaction pathways. The first metabolism may grow from these differences. Instead of inventing energy use from nothing, early life may inherit a pattern already established by geology. As protocells become more stable, the relationship between environment and organism changes. At first, every useful molecule must be supplied from outside. Later, internal reactions begin producing some needed components. A system that makes its own building blocks is less dependent on one setting. It can spread from a mineral pore into open water, from a warm pool into a cooler channel, or from a shoreline into a deeper habitat. This transition is gradual. There is no clear instant when chemistry ends and biology begins. One system may copy without regulating energy, while another maintains a membrane without reliable inheritance. Across many generations of chemical trial, the boundaries sharpen, replication becomes more accurate, catalysts become more specific, membranes become more controlled, networks become less dependent on chance. Eventually, a population of cells exists that shares an ancestry with all later organisms. This common ancestor is not necessarily the first life, and it is not necessarily a single, isolated individual. It is better understood as part of an early community in which genes and chemical innovations may pass between primitive cells. By the time the deeper shared features of modern life are established, evolution has already been operating for a long time. The genetic code, ribosomes, membranes, and central metabolic pathways carry signs of this ancient history, but they do not preserve every earlier experiment. Most chemical lineages vanish. Only one broad tradition leads onward into the living world. The first life is therefore both a planetary event and a profound narrowing of possibilities. Earth may explore countless chemical routes, yet only a few become self-sustaining, and perhaps only one leaves descendants. In hidden pores, shallow pools, mineral surfaces, or connected environments that no longer exist, matter begins to preserve information about itself. Molecules no longer merely react and disappear. Some reactions help produce the conditions for their own continuation. the planet has crossed another threshold. Rock, water, and gas have not become alive in any simple sense, but within their circulation a new process has appeared, one capable of memory, variation, and persistence. From that quiet beginning, every later cell inherits an unbroken chain. The earliest true cells enter a world that offers almost no refuge from change. The atmosphere contains no breathable oxygen. Ultraviolet radiation reaches the surface with little restraint, and the oceans carry dissolved metals and volcanic chemicals that would poison most later organisms. Yet these conditions do not prevent life from spreading. They shape it. The first microbial communities remain small, simple, and chemically dependent on their surroundings, but they possess the decisive traits that separate biology from the reactions that came before. They preserve information, they copy that information with enough accuracy to maintain a lineage, and they use energy to repair themselves and produce new cells. The earliest cells are probably far simpler than modern bacteria or archaea, though even these primitive forms require remarkable coordination. A membrane separates the inner chemical system from the environment. Genetic molecules hold instructions. Ribosomes translate those instructions into proteins. Enzymes speed reactions that would otherwise proceed too slowly. Energy-carrying molecules move power from one process to another. These features are shared across all known life, suggesting that they arise very early. The last universal common ancestor, often called by its initials as LUCA, is not necessarily the first living thing. It is the ancestral population from which all surviving cellular lineages descend. By the time Luca appears, evolution has already tested many solutions, discarded countless failures, and established a core system stable enough to endure for billions of years. That ancestral community likely lives in an environment rich in chemical energy. Some evidence points toward hot settings near hydrothermal systems, where hydrogen, carbon dioxide, sulfur, and metals provide the raw material for metabolism. Other possibilities remain open, and the first surviving lineages may move between several habitats. Early cells that can use more than one source of energy, tolerate a wider range of temperature, or protect themselves from harmful ions spread farther. A mutation that slightly improves a membrane, repairs damaged genetic material, or increases access to nutrients can alter the future of an entire lineage. Most mutations do little or cause harm. A few improve survival under particular conditions. Through repetition across enormous spans of time, small advantages accumulate. Life becomes more resilient without becoming invulnerable. The first metabolisms are anaerobic, meaning they do not depend on free oxygen. Oxygen is almost absent, and when it appears, it can be dangerously reactive. Early cells instead move electrons between compounds containing hydrogen, sulfur, iron, carbon, and nitrogen. Some use hydrogen as a source of electrons and carbon dioxide as a source of carbon. Others gain energy by transforming sulfur compounds or iron minerals. One organism releases a waste product that another can use. Microbial communities begin to divide the chemical landscape into linked zones. The planet's first ecosystems are not forests or reefs. They are films, mats, pores, and sediments in which invisible populations exchange matter. Horizontal gene transfer also plays a major role. Modern organisms usually inherit most genetic information from their parents, but microbes can exchange genes across lineages. In the early world, this sharing may be even more widespread. A new enzyme, membrane system, or repair mechanism can pass between cells and spread through a community. Early evolution may therefore resemble a web more than a cleanly branching tree. The distinction between bacteria and archaea gradually becomes clearer, especially in the chemistry of their membranes and the machinery used to process genetic information. Their cells remain small, but their metabolic possibilities expand far beyond what size alone suggests. The microbial Earth is restless. Continents are small and repeatedly altered by tectonic activity. Volcanoes release gases into the atmosphere and nutrients into the ocean. Hydrothermal vents create local regions of heat and chemical abundance. Impacts still occur, though their frequency declines. A large collision can boil surface water, darken the atmosphere, or destroy life across broad areas. But microbes living deep in rock, beneath sediments, or within protected waters may survive. Life occupies enough hidden places that total extinction becomes increasingly difficult. Survival is distributed through depth. Some organisms live near the surface and depend on sunlight or chemicals delivered from above. Others remain underground, drawing energy from reactions between water and rock. In deep fractures, water reacts with iron-bearing minerals and releases hydrogen. Microbes can use that hydrogen even far from sunlight. This deep biosphere becomes one of Earth's most persistent refuges. Life survives not because every environment remains stable, but because different environments fail at different times. When the surface becomes hostile, the crust may remain habitable. When oceans change, pores in rock may preserve old conditions. Diversity becomes a form of planetary memory. Sunlight eventually becomes another major source of power. The first forms of photosynthesis do not split water and do not release oxygen. Instead, microbes use light to drive reactions involving substances such as hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen, or dissolved iron. This anoxygenic photosynthesis allows cells to gather energy from the sun while remaining within the chemistry of an oxygen-free world. Pigments absorb particular wavelengths, and different organisms occupy different layers according to which colors of light reach them. Microbial mats become structured communities. Cells near the top capture sunlight. Cells below consume the products that drift downward. Deeper layers return other compounds upward. Over time, some mats trap sediment and build layered structures known as stromatolites. Similar structures survive in ancient rocks, providing some of the clearest visible evidence of early microbial life. Yet even stromatolites require careful interpretation because non-living processes can produce layered forms. The oldest records of life therefore remain debated. Chemical signatures in carbon, microscopic structures in ancient minerals, and traces of biological activity all offer clues. But heat and pressure alter the evidence. Earth's early crust has been folded, buried, and changed so many times that certainty becomes rare. The history of microbial life must be reconstructed from fragments. Despite this uncertainty, the broad transformation is unmistakable. By more than 3.5 billion years ago, life is already established in the oceans, and it may be older still. Microbes influence the chemistry of water and sediment. They speed reactions, concentrate elements, and create local environments that would not exist without them. The planet begins to change not only around life, but because of life. At first, this influence remains subtle. No green continents appear. No animals disturb the seafloor. The sky remains without oxygen, and the sea may look dark, green, or iron-rich depending on location. Yet biological activity is spreading through the geochemical cycles of carbon, sulfur, nitrogen, and iron. Cells take simple compounds from the environment, reorganize them, and release altered products. These products feed other organisms or react with minerals. Biology becomes woven into geology. Genetic systems also become more durable. DNA takes on the central role of long-term information storage, while RNA remains essential in translation and regulation. DNA is chemically more stable than RNA and can be copied with increasingly effective repair. Proteins become the main working molecules, folding into shapes that perform specialized tasks. the genetic code becomes nearly universal, linking sequences of nucleic acids to the amino acids used in proteins. Why this particular code becomes dominant remains one of the deepest questions in biology. It may begin as one workable arrangement among many, and then become difficult to replace once complex systems depend on it. The same is true of the limited set of amino acids used by modern life. Chemistry offers more possibilities, but evolution settles on a shared toolkit. This common language allows genes and functions to move between organisms and preserves continuity across immense time. During this age, cells discover nearly every fundamental way of obtaining energy that remains in use. They learn to live in heat, cold, salt, acid, darkness, pressure, and scarcity. They build partnerships, exchange genes, and transform minerals. Their bodies remain microscopic, but their collective activity reaches across oceans and into the atmosphere. Long before complex organisms appear, life already possesses endurance, adaptability, and global influence. The next great change begins when one microbial innovation turns a common molecule into an almost unlimited source of electrons. Water is everywhere, and a new form of photosynthesis learns to split it. The waste product is oxygen. For the organisms that release it, oxygen is merely the residue of capturing sunlight. For the planet, it becomes the beginning of a revolution. The next great transformation begins in shallow water, where sunlight reaches microbial communities spread across sediment, rock, and coastal flats. Among these organisms, a new form of photosynthesis appears. Earlier photosynthetic cells use light without releasing oxygen, drawing electrons from substances such as hydrogen sulfide or dissolved iron. The new system uses water instead. Water is abundant, but its molecules are stable and difficult to split. The organisms that achieve this gain access to an immense supply of electrons. They combine light energy with carbon dioxide to build organic matter, and oxygen emerges as a waste product. At first, this oxygen does not gather in the air. It reacts almost immediately with the reduced material surrounding it. Dissolved iron in the ocean offers one of the largest chemical sinks. When oxygen meets iron in seawater, the iron oxidizes and forms insoluble minerals that settle toward the seafloor. Layer after layer accumulates, alternating with silica-rich deposits and other sediments. Over time, these beds become banded iron formations, some of the most striking records of the ancient oceans. Their red and dark layers preserve the memory of a world in which biological activity begins changing the chemistry of an entire planet. Oxygen also reacts with volcanic gases, sulfur compounds, and fresh minerals exposed at the surface. Every reaction consumes it. For a long interval, oxygen production rises without causing a large atmospheric increase because the planet contains so much material ready to absorb it. The microbial producers may already be widespread, but the chemical world around them is still strongly reducing. This delay is important. Life changes the environment gradually, not because the innovation is weak, but because Earth is vast and filled with reactive reservoirs. Cyanobacteria become the main agents of this transformation. They form mats in shallow seas, build stromatolites, and spread across environments where light and water remain available. Their cells are small, yet their collective influence extends far beyond any individual colony. Every generation releases more oxygen. Some of it escapes local reactions and dissolves into the ocean. Some reaches the atmosphere. As iron becomes less abundant in surface waters and other sinks begin to fill, oxygen starts to accumulate more persistently. The change is not smooth. Oxygen levels rise, fall, and vary between regions. Deep oceans may remain oxygen poor while shallow waters become more oxygenated. Coastal zones can differ sharply from open seas. Even the atmosphere may pass through unstable stages as methane. volcanic gases, and biological production compete. Around 2,400,000,000 years ago, the balance shifts decisively during the Great Oxidation event. Atmospheric oxygen increases from extremely low levels to a still modest but geologically significant concentration. This is not the arrival of the modern atmosphere. Oxygen remains far below its later abundance, and much of the ocean stays anoxic. Yet the increase is large enough to transform mineral surfaces, atmospheric chemistry, climate, and the possibilities available to life. For many organisms, the change is catastrophic. Oxygen readily damages molecules by stripping electrons from them. Early anaerobic cells lack the protective enzymes needed to control reactive oxygen compounds. Membranes, proteins, and genetic material can be harmed. Habitats that once support anaerobic communities become dangerous. Some organisms retreat into oxygen-poor sediments, deep waters, and underground environments. Their descendants persist there for billions of years. Others evolve defenses, including enzymes that neutralize reactive forms of oxygen. A few go further and use oxygen itself as part of metabolism. This becomes one of evolution's most powerful innovations. Aerobic respiration allows cells to extract far more usable energy from organic molecules than many anaerobic pathways can provide. Oxygen is still hazardous, but organisms that regulate it gain access to an energetic advantage. A substance that begins as poison becomes fuel. This reversal changes the direction of biological history. The rise of oxygen also alters the atmosphere above. Methane, a strong greenhouse gas, reacts with oxygen and becomes less abundant. Because the young sun is still fainter than it is in later ages, a decline in methane may contribute to severe global cooling. Geological evidence indicates major glaciations around the time of rising oxygen. Ice may spread widely, perhaps reaching low latitudes during some intervals. The exact links between oxygen, methane, volcanism, and climate remain debated. But the broad connection is clear. Biological activity can affect planetary temperature by changing atmospheric composition. Life is no longer merely adapting to Earth. It is helping create the conditions to which it must then adapt. Oxygen also leads to the formation of ozone in the upper atmosphere. Ozone consists of 3 oxygen atoms and forms when sunlight breaks ordinary oxygen molecules apart, allowing the fragments to recombine in new arrangements. A growing ozone layer absorbs much of the sun's damaging ultraviolet radiation. The shield remains weaker than in later eras, but it changes the surface environment. Areas exposed to sunlight become less hostile to fragile biological molecules. This does not immediately bring life onto land, yet it reduces one of the barriers that once made the surface dangerous. In the oceans, chemical boundaries become sharper. Oxygenated upper waters lie above deeper layers rich in iron, sulfur, and other reduced substances. Where these zones meet, microbes exploit the contrast. Some oxidize iron, some reduce sulfate, some consume methane. Nutrients are transformed as they move between layers. Nitrogen cycling becomes especially important because all cells need nitrogen to build proteins and genetic material. Certain microbes convert atmospheric nitrogen into compounds that life can use, while others return nitrogen to the atmosphere. These pathways link oxygen levels to the productivity of entire ecosystems. Phosphorus also controls growth, and its availability changes as iron minerals form, dissolve, and settle. The rise of oxygen therefore does not simply add one gas, it reorganizes the movement of essential elements. For long periods, this reorganization may restrict life as much as it supports it. Oxygen can trap phosphorus in sediments, reducing the nutrients available to surface organisms. Deep waters can become rich in toxic hydrogen sulfide. The middle chapters of Earth history may contain long intervals of apparent stability, with oxygen present but limited and complex life still rare. This does not mean evolution stops. Microbial ecosystems continue experimenting with new metabolisms, partnerships, and cellular structures. The planet remains alive at every scale that can be seen only through a microscope. Among these changes, one partnership becomes especially important. A larger cell takes in a smaller bacterium capable of using oxygen efficiently. Instead of digesting it, the host retains it. The two cells form a lasting relationship. The internal bacterium supplies energy-rich molecules, while the host provides nutrients and protection. Over generations, the partners become inseparable. Many genes move from the internal bacterium into the host's genetic system. The once independent cell becomes a mitochondrion. This process, known as endosymbiosis, lies near the origin of the eukaryotic cell, the complex cell type that later gives rise to animals, plants, fungi, and many single-celled organisms. The details of the first host remain uncertain. It may belong to an archaeal lineage already capable of close association with bacteria. Whatever its identity, the merger creates a cell with far greater energetic capacity. Energy can now be produced across folded internal membranes without requiring the outer surface of the cell to carry the entire burden. Larger genomes and more elaborate internal structures become easier to maintain. The cell can grow, regulate itself, and explore forms of organization unavailable to most prokaryotes. A later endosymbiotic event occurs when a eukaryotic cell takes in a photosynthetic cyanobacterium. That internal partner becomes a chloroplast, giving rise to the lineage that eventually includes algae and plants. Oxygen production, which begins as a microbial innovation, is now built into a more complex cellular architecture. The atmosphere and the cell have transformed one another. The oxygen revolution is therefore not a single event with a clear beginning and end. It unfolds through pulses, pauses, and reversals across hundreds of millions of years. Cyanobacteria release oxygen, rocks and oceans absorb it, atmospheric chemistry changes, climate responds, anaerobic ecosystems retreat or adapt, aerobic metabolism expands. Complex cells emerge from intimate microbial partnerships. Each development depends on earlier conditions, yet none follows automatically. Earth could have remained a planet of anaerobic life. Oxygen might have stayed trapped in mineral reactions. Endosymbiosis might never have stabilized. Instead, through a chain of contingent changes, the planet acquires a new energetic and chemical foundation. The oceans are not yet filled with animals, and the continents remain almost entirely barren. Still, the future has shifted. Oxygen now exists as both danger and opportunity. Cells possess internal power stations descended from free-living bacteria. The upper atmosphere begins filtering harmful radiation beneath a sky still unfamiliar. The groundwork for biological complexity quietly strengthens. Complex life begins not with large bodies, but with a new arrangement inside a single cell. The earliest eukaryotes carry internal structures that divide work into separate spaces. Genetic material is enclosed within a nucleus. Membranes form compartments where particular reactions can occur under controlled conditions. Mitochondria convert chemical energy into a form the cell can use efficiently. While in photosynthetic lineages chloroplasts capture sunlight, these features do not appear all at once, and their exact sequence remains uncertain. Yet together they allow cells to become larger, more flexible, and more internally organized than most bacteria or archaea. The nucleus protects a growing genome, but it also changes how information is managed. In prokaryotic cells, genetic instructions can be read and translated in the same general space. In eukaryotic cells, copies of genetic information are prepared within the nucleus and then carried outward, where ribosomes build proteins. This separation slows some processes, but it permits additional layers of control. Genetic messages can be edited, delayed, combined, or silenced before they are used. The cell gains a more elaborate way to decide which instructions matter at a particular moment. This becomes important as genomes expand and cells begin responding to more complicated environments. Internal scaffolding also changes what a cell can do. Networks of protein fibers support the membrane, move materials, and help the cell alter its shape. Some eukaryotes crawl across surfaces, others extend temporary arms around food particles and draw them inside. Predation at the microscopic scale becomes more effective. A cell can now engulf another cell, digest it, or sometimes retain it as a partner. The ancient endosymbiotic events that produce mitochondria and chloroplasts become part of a wider pattern in which organisms survive through intimate association. Some partnerships remain temporary. Others become so complete that the partners lose the ability to live separately. Complexity grows not only through competition, but through merger. Sexual reproduction adds another source of change. Many eukaryotes develop ways to combine genetic material from different individuals. During this process, chromosomes are copied, exchanged, and rearranged before being passed onward. The result is variation produced more rapidly than by mutation alone. Harmful changes can sometimes be separated from useful ones, while favorable combinations can spread through a population. Sexual reproduction carries costs and is not universal, but it gives many lineages a powerful response to parasites, shifting climates, and changing resources. Life becomes able to explore a wider range of genetic possibilities while preserving the basic structure of the cell. For much of this history, however, the world remains microbial. Eukaryotic cells appear long before animals and large plants. They live as solitary organisms, colonies, or loose communities in oceans that are still chemically layered. Surface waters may contain oxygen, while deeper waters remain poor in it or rich in hydrogen sulfide. Nutrients fluctuate with erosion, volcanic activity, and the movement of continents. Eukaryotes need more energy than many prokaryotes, so their expansion is tied to oxygen and food. Where those resources remain scarce, complex cells stay limited. The existence of mitochondria creates potential, but the planet must supply enough energy for that potential to be used. Continents continue to gather and separate. Their movement changes coastlines, ocean circulation, and the amount of land exposed to weathering when fresh rock is lifted into warm, wet climates. Chemical weathering removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Carbon becomes stored in dissolved compounds and sediments. If this removal becomes strong enough, greenhouse warming weakens, ice expands, sunlight is reflected back into space, and cooling accelerates. This feedback can push Earth toward widespread glaciation. During the distant interval known as the Cryogenian, ice reaches low latitudes more than once. Geological deposits left by glaciers appear in regions that were then near the equator. These events are often described as snowball Earth, though the exact appearance of the frozen planet remains debated. Some models produce ice covering nearly the entire ocean. Others leave narrow belts of open water or thin seasonal ice. The difference matters greatly for life, but both possibilities describe an Earth transformed by cold on a planetary scale. Beneath an ice-covered sky, sunlight reaching the ocean falls sharply. Photosynthetic organisms lose much of their habitat. Surface waters cool, circulation changes, and the exchange of gases between ocean and atmosphere becomes restricted. Glaciers grind across continents and carry rock toward the sea, dust, volcanic ash, and dark sediments settle on the ice. While pressure and geothermal heat may keep water liquid below, the world is not motionless. Ice flows slowly, cracks open and close, and seawater circulates under frozen cover. Hydrothermal vents continue releasing heat and chemicals from the crust. In these hidden environments, microbes endure. Life survives in pockets where liquid water, energy, and nutrients remain connected. Some organisms may persist beneath transparent or seasonally thinning ice, receiving just enough light for photosynthesis. Others live around volcanic islands, hot springs, or open water created by winds and currents. Still others remain in the deep ocean, entirely independent of sunlight. The same diversity that protects life during impacts now protects it during global cold. No single refuge needs to preserve every lineage. Survival is distributed across many small environments, and from those scattered populations, ecosystems can later recover. The glaciations may also reshape evolution. Isolation separates populations. Scarcity favors efficient metabolisms and close cooperation. Cells that tolerate freezing, darkness, or changing salinity gain an advantage. Some produce protective compounds that reduce damage from ice crystals. Others enter dormant states and wait through unfavorable periods. Predators and prey continue interacting at microscopic scales, but the ecological balance becomes unstable. Extinctions remove established lineages and leave open roles for survivors. The pressure of the environment does not guarantee progress, yet it changes which forms remain available when the climate warms again. Ending a global glaciation requires a reversal of the cooling feedback. Volcanoes continue releasing carbon dioxide even when much of the surface is frozen. If weathering slows beneath ice, carbon dioxide accumulates in the atmosphere. Over immense spans of time, greenhouse warming strengthens until melting begins. Once dark water and bare rock appear, they absorb more sunlight than ice. Warming accelerates. The transition out of deep glaciation may be rapid by geological standards, producing intense rainfall and powerful erosion. Rivers carry large quantities of dissolved material into the ocean. Carbonate sediments form in unusual abundance above glacial deposits, recording a planet moving abruptly from extreme cold toward a warmer greenhouse state. The aftermath is chemically turbulent. Fresh nutrients enter the sea. Oxygen levels may rise in some regions as photosynthetic organisms expand. Iron, phosphorus, carbon, and sulfur are redistributed between land and ocean. The water can remain stratified, and oxygen may still be absent at depth, but shallow environments become more productive. Eukaryotic algae diversify, supporting larger food webs. Cells encounter new opportunities for cooperation, predation, and specialization. The world that emerges from the ice is not simply restored to its earlier condition. It has been ground, flooded, weathered, and chemically renewed. Multicellularity begins to appear in several lineages. It is not one invention. Algae, fungi, animals, and other groups reach it independently through different paths. At first, a multicellular organism may be little more than a cluster of cells that remain attached after division. The advantage can be simple. A larger body is harder to swallow. A colony can move more effectively, capture light from a broader area, or divide tasks among its cells. Over time, communication improves. Some cells become specialized for movement, feeding, defense, or reproduction. Once specialization deepens, individual cells give up part of their independence and become components of a larger living system. This transition depends on trust enforced by genetics. Cells must cooperate, and uncontrolled growth must be restrained. The mechanisms that later govern development, immunity, and cancer begin in these ancient negotiations between the needs of the cell and the survival of the whole. By the close of the Cryogenian, the foundations of large complex life are in place, though the oceans still lack the crowded animal communities that appear later. Eukaryotic cells possess nuclei, internal membranes, dynamic skeletons, and powerful energy systems inherited from ancient symbiosis. Sexual reproduction creates variation. Multicellular experiments spread through algae and other lineages. Global ice has tested the durability of these systems without erasing them. The frozen intervals become not a pause in evolution, but a severe filter through which new possibilities pass. When the ice retreats and the seas brighten again, life carries the memory of darkness within its cells. It has learned to survive through partnership, dormancy, flexibility, and division of labor. The planet is approaching another threshold, one in which bodies become larger, ecosystems become more visible, and the quiet world of microbes begins to give way to organisms whose forms can finally be preserved as fossils. The retreat of the great ice sheets does not reveal a world already filled with animals. It reveals oceans in transition. Glaciers have ground continents into fine sediment. Rivers carry fresh minerals toward the sea, and volcanic activity continues to supply carbon dioxide and other gases from the interior. Shallow waters receive pulses of phosphorus, iron, calcium, and trace elements. Photosynthetic microbes and algae expand where light and nutrients meet. Their activity adds oxygen to surface waters, while deeper parts of the ocean often remain poor in oxygen or rich in sulfide. The chemical structure of the sea is uneven, layered, and unstable. Yet within this instability, the conditions needed for large bodies begin to appear more often and for longer intervals. Oxygen is one of the most important limits. Small cells can survive with little energy, but larger organisms must move materials across greater distances, maintain more tissue, and coordinate many specialized cells. These demands increase the value of aerobic respiration. Mitochondria provide the cellular machinery, but the environment must supply enough oxygen for that machinery to work. As oxygenated zones widen in shallow seas, multicellular organisms gain room to grow. The increase is not a simple worldwide rise. Oxygen may expand along coastlines and continental shelves, while deep basins remain hostile. Local habitats become islands of possibility within a planet still dominated by microbes. In these brighter waters, algae form extensive communities. Some grow as sheets, branches, or filaments. Others build thicker bodies capable of lifting photosynthetic cells toward light. Their remains add organic carbon to sediments. When that carbon is buried instead of being broken down, the oxygen produced during photosynthesis is not immediately consumed. Burial therefore allows more oxygen to remain in the environment. Tectonics, erosion, and biology begin reinforcing one another. Continents provide nutrients. Nutrients support photosynthesis. Photosynthesis produces organic matter and oxygen. Burial preserves part of that chemical imbalance. The atmosphere and oceans slowly shift because living cells alter the fate of carbon. Multicellularity offers several advantages, but it also creates new problems. Cells must adhere to one another without losing all independence. They must communicate, control growth, and share resources. Some cells may specialize for movement, feeding, reproduction, or protection. Others form structural tissue. The organism must prevent individual cells from multiplying at the expense of the whole. These demands require genetic regulation more elaborate than that of a loose colony. Development becomes a process in which the same genome produces different kinds of cells according to position and timing. A body is no longer merely a mass of similar units. It becomes an organized pattern. The earliest animals emerge somewhere within this long experiment. but their beginnings are difficult to identify. Animals share deep molecular features, including systems for cell adhesion, communication, and controlled development. Some of these tools exist in single-celled relatives, suggesting that evolution does not invent the entire animal toolkit at once. It assembles older functions into a new form of cooperation. A protein once used to attach a cell to a surface can help cells bind to one another. A signaling pathway once used to detect the environment can help one part of a body influence another. Innovation often comes through rearrangement. The first animals are probably small, soft, and easily destroyed. They may live on the seafloor, between sediment grains, or within microbial mats. Some filter particles from water, others absorb dissolved nutrients. Because they lack shells, bones, and mineralized teeth, their bodies leave few clear fossils. Chemical traces and tiny impressions hint at their presence, but the record remains incomplete. By the time unmistakable large organisms appear, animal evolution may already have a long hidden history. The Ediacaran period preserves the first widespread communities of large complex bodies. Across ancient sea floors, soft organisms rest on or within microbial mats. Some resemble quilted leaves, discs, ribbons, or segmented cushions. Many possess forms unlike any living creature. Dickinsonia lies flat against the sediment with a broad oval body divided into repeated units. Other organisms rise upright into the water, anchored by holdfasts and supported by frond-shaped structures. Some appear to spread across the seafloor in branching patterns. Their surfaces may absorb nutrients directly, or they may interact with currents in ways that remain uncertain. These organisms do not fit easily into modern categories. Some may be early animals. Some may belong to extinct branches of complex life. Others may represent experiments in body construction that leave no descendants. The Ediacaran world is therefore not a simple prelude filled with primitive versions of familiar creatures. It is a separate ecological age, with its own rules and forms. Microbial mats cover large areas of the seafloor because few animals yet burrow deeply through them. These mats stabilize sediment and create firm surfaces on which soft bodies can rest. They also shape local chemistry, producing oxygen near the top during daylight while deeper layers remain anoxic. Organisms living on the mats encounter steep gradients across distances of only a few millimeters. A body that can lift part of itself above the surface may reach fresher water. A body that spreads widely may absorb more nutrients. A body that moves, even slowly, may escape depleted patches. Natural selection begins exploring size, shape, orientation, and mobility within this unusual landscape. Evidence of movement appears in trails left across the sediment. Some Ediacaran organisms glide or crawl, feeding as they pass over microbial surfaces. This behavior marks an important shift. Once organisms move deliberately, they begin changing the seafloor rather than simply occupying it. Mobility creates new relationships between food, space, and competition. A moving animal can search for better conditions. It can encounter other organisms more often. It may begin to prey, scavenge, or avoid being consumed. The ecological consequences remain modest at first, but the basic tension of animal life is forming. One organism's body becomes another organism's opportunity. Predation may already exist in simple forms, though direct evidence is limited. Small holes in shells from the latest Ediacaran suggest that some creatures attack mineralized prey. Other organisms begin producing protective coverings or stronger tissues. The appearance of predators changes the value of movement, senses, and defense. Even weak predation can accelerate evolution because survival now depends not only on climate and chemistry, but on the behavior of other living things. ecosystems become self-intensifying. An improvement in one lineage creates pressure on another. Better feeding favours better escape. Stronger armour favours stronger tools. Greater mobility favours improved coordination. The environment is no longer only rock, water, and air. It increasingly includes other organisms acting as selective forces. Oxygen helps support these changes, but oxygen alone cannot explain them. Nutrient supply matters. Calcium and phosphate become more available in some marine settings. Genetic systems for development grow more complex. Ecological interactions become stronger. Continental breakup creates long coastlines and isolated basins where populations can diverge. Repeated changes in sea level open and close shallow habitats. No single cause produces the rise of animal life. The transition emerges from many processes operating together, each altering the importance of the others. The late Ediacaran also contains disruption. Some earlier communities disappear before the Cambrian begins. Changes in oxygen, sea level, nutrient flow, and sediment conditions may contribute. New burrowing animals disturb microbial mats, destroying habitats that older forms depend upon. Predation may increase. Ecological replacement may therefore matter alongside environmental stress. The decline of the classic Ediacaran organisms is not necessarily one sudden mass extinction. It may be a prolonged turnover in which unfamiliar bodies lose ground as more mobile and active animals spread. The disappearance creates a misleading silence, because soft organisms fossilize only under rare conditions. Entire communities can vanish from the record even when life continues nearby. By the end of this period, the major ingredients of later animal ecosystems are present in early form. Multicellular bodies possess specialized tissues. Organisms move across and through sediment. Feeding strategies diversify. Predators and defenses appear. Developmental genes can build repeated units, front and rear ends, and organized body axes. Oxygenated shallow seas provide growing space, while deeper waters remain chemically unstable. The stage is not calm, and it is not complete. It is crowded with experiments, most of which will leave no living descendants. The coming Cambrian diversification does not begin from emptiness. It rises from this hidden preparation, from microbial mats disturbed by movement, from soft bodies testing the possibilities of shape, and from oceans slowly becoming energetic enough to support a more demanding kind of life. The Cambrian world opens beneath shallow seas spread across broad continental margins. High sea levels cover broad areas with warm, sunlit water. Rivers carry minerals from newly exposed land into coastal environments. Tides and currents move oxygen and nutrients through lagoons, shelves, and open basins. The ocean remains chemically uneven, with some deeper regions still poor in oxygen, but many shallow habitats now provide enough energy to support active animals. The difference from the Ediacaran world is the sudden visibility of bodies, behaviors, and relationships developing in quieter forms for a long time. Fossils become more abundant because organisms begin producing shells, spines, plates, tubes, and other hard parts that survive burial. At the same time, animals move more deeply through sediment, leave complex tracks, and interact with one another in ways that reshape the seafloor. The Cambrian explosion is therefore both a biological diversification and a transformation of the fossil record. Many major animal body plans appear within a geologically brief interval, but their roots extend backward into earlier, poorly preserved lineages. Evolution begins exploring a wider range of structures than ever before, and the sea fills with forms that seem unfamiliar and foundational. Some animals crawl along the bottom on jointed limbs. Some swim with rows of flexible flaps. Some remain fixed in place and filter particles from moving water. Others burrow, graze, scavenge, or hunt. Bodies acquire clear fronts and backs, upper and lower surfaces, repeated segments, and specialized regions for feeding or movement. These changes allow different parts of the body to perform different tasks. A head can concentrate senses and feeding structures. Limbs can become adapted for walking, swimming, grasping, or stirring sediment. Repeated segments can be modified without redesigning the whole organism. This modular organization gives evolution a powerful way to create variety. Arthropods become especially successful. Their bodies are divided into segments and covered by an external skeleton that protects soft tissue and provides attachment points for muscles. Jointed appendages can be altered into legs, antennae, mouthparts, or paddles. Trilobites spread across many marine environments. Their hard upper surfaces preserve readily, creating a rich fossil record, but they represent only one branch of a much larger arthropod radiation. Some relatives possess broad head shields, grasping limbs, or long spines. Molting allows these animals to grow, but it also creates moments of vulnerability when the old covering is shed and the new one remains soft. Protection and danger are built into the same structure. Predation intensifies this pressure. Anomalocaris and related animals move through the water with lateral flaps and use curved frontal appendages to capture prey. Their circular mouthparts and large eyes mark them as some of the first large active predators known from the fossil record. Their existence changes the value of speed, concealment, armor, and awareness. A slow animal with no defense becomes easier to consume. A well-protected animal forces predators to become stronger or more precise. Once pursuit and escape begin shaping survival, evolution acquires a new rhythm. Every improvement in one lineage becomes part of the environment faced by another. Eyes are among the most important developments. Light-sensitive cells are much older than the Cambrian, but compound eyes and other advanced visual systems now become prominent. Vision allows animals to detect movement at a distance, identify shapes, and respond before contact occurs. Predators can search more efficiently, prey can flee, hide, or orient protective structures toward danger. Better vision may therefore accelerate changes in behavior and body design. Yet eyes do not evolve once in a single form. Different lineages build them from different tissues and arrange them according to their own histories. Some use many small lenses, others develop simpler light-detecting cups. The common pressure is the growing importance of information. In a more active ecosystem, survival increasingly depends on sensing what is about to happen. Mineralized skeletons also appear in many groups. Calcium carbonate, calcium phosphate, silica, and organic materials are combined into protective or supportive structures. The availability of these minerals matters, but biology must first evolve ways to control their deposition. A shell is not merely seawater hardening around a body. It is a regulated construction shaped by proteins, cells, and inherited developmental programs. Once the ability exists, natural selection can modify thickness, shape, flexibility, and ornament. Spines discourage attackers, plates protect the back, tubes anchor animals within sediment, hard mouthparts scrape microbial films or crush food. Skeletons also support larger bodies and stronger muscles. The chemistry of the ocean and the demands of ecology meet within the same structures. The seafloor changes as burrowing grows more intense. Earlier microbial mats stabilize the sediment and create layered surfaces. Cambrian animals dig through those layers in search of food, shelter, or oxygen. Their activity mixes sediment, introduces seawater below the surface, and disrupts chemical boundaries that once remained sharply separated. This process, known as bioturbation, transforms marine habitats. Organisms living within the sediment encounter more oxygen but also more disturbance. Microbial mats decline in many areas. Nutrients buried in the seafloor are brought upward, while organic matter from the surface is carried downward. Animals become engineers of their environment, altering conditions for themselves and every organism nearby. The same transition that supports new diversity may help eliminate older Ediacaran communities adapted to stable mat-covered surfaces. Sponges also become important components of Cambrian seas. Their bodies draw water through networks of pores, capturing tiny food particles and dissolved material. Reefs begin to form through combinations of sponges, microbes, and early skeletal organisms. These structures rise above the seafloor and create sheltered spaces, hard surfaces, and changes in local currents. A reef is not only a collection of organisms, it is a physical landscape built by life. Small animals hide in crevices, predators search along edges. Filter feeders position themselves where currents are strongest. Biological construction increases habitat diversity. Among the small inhabitants are early chordates, members of the broad lineage that later includes fishes and all land vertebrates. Their bodies remain simple and easily overlooked. A flexible supporting rod runs along the back, muscles are arranged in repeated blocks, and a tail allows directed swimming. Their fossils are rare, yet their structure carries a distant possibility. The backbone has not yet appeared in its later form, but the basic organization from which vertebrates emerge is present. Evolution has no foresight, and these animals are not moving toward humanity. They survive because their bodies work in the seas around them. Only much later does one branch of their descendants enter a sequence leading through fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and primates. Many other Cambrian experiments leave no descendants at all. Upper Binia bears a flexible proboscis and multiple eyes. Hallucigenia walks on paired limbs beneath a body protected by spines, though early reconstructions mistakenly place it upside down. Wiwaxia carries scales and long defensive spines. Vetulicolians possess unusual divided bodies whose relationships remain debated. These creatures reveal how difficult it is to fit early animal life into modern categories. Some belong near familiar branches, while others occupy extinct side paths. The Cambrian is not a parade of crude ancestors. It is a dense thicket of evolutionary experiments, with survival depending on local success rather than future importance. The causes of this diversification are equally tangled. Rising oxygen provides more energy for movement and growth. New developmental systems allow bodies to be built in varied forms. Changes in ocean chemistry support mineralized tissues. Continental arrangement creates extensive shallow seas. Nutrient input increases biological productivity. Predation drives defense, senses, and mobility. Burrowing opens new habitats while destroying old ones. No single trigger is sufficient. The explosion emerges from feedback between environment, genetics, and ecology. Once animals begin altering one another's survival so directly, diversification can reinforce itself. More body types create more ecological roles. More roles support more interactions. More interactions favour further specialization. By the end of the Cambrian, the oceans contain nearly all the major modes of animal life found later hunters: grazers, suspension feeders, burrowers, scavengers, reef builders, swimmers, and armoured bottom dwellers. Extinctions still remove many lineages, and oxygen-poor episodes repeatedly disturb marine communities, but animal ecosystems do not return to their earlier simplicity. The seafloor has been opened, the water column has become contested space, and the body itself has become a field of innovation. Life now carries armour, eyes, limbs, early jaws, and nervous systems capable of rapid response. the microbial planet remains beneath everything, still driving chemical cycles and supporting food webs, but above it a new visible world has taken hold. Evolution has entered an age in which organisms do not merely endure the environment, they pursue, evade, build, disturb, and transform it. The conquest of land begins long before animals walk beneath trees. It begins at the edges of water, where tides expose mud, rain falls on bare rock, and microscopic organisms endure brief intervals of drying. The continents are still harsh places. Ultraviolet radiation remains dangerous, soils are thin or absent, and temperatures shift quickly between day and night. Fresh water is scarce in many regions, and the pull of gravity acts without the support of surrounding seawater. Yet land also offers sunlight without the filtering effects of depth. Carbon dioxide in direct contact with photosynthetic cells, and mineral surfaces not yet occupied by complex ecosystems. Life approaches this new environment gradually. Microbial films spread across damp stone. Fungi and algae form close partnerships, creating lichen-like communities capable of surviving exposure. These pioneers release acids that break down rock, trap dust, and begin forming primitive soils. Their work is quiet, but it changes the surface. Once minerals and organic matter collect together, water can be retained longer, nutrients can remain near the surface, and other organisms can establish themselves. Early plants descend from green algae adapted to shallow, fresh water. Their ancestors already possess chlorophyll, cell walls, and the ability to store energy captured from sunlight. Moving onto land requires further changes. A protective outer covering reduces water loss. Spores develop resistant walls that survive drying and travel through air. Simple tissues begin moving water and nutrients from one part of the body to another. At first, these plants remain small and close to wet ground. They have no deep roots, broad leaves, or large trunks. Their upright stems lift reproductive structures into the air, where wind can spread spores beyond the edge of a pool or stream. Even this modest height changes the landscape. Green patches appear along shorelines and floodplains, interrupting the dark surfaces of rock and sediment. Fungi accompany plants from the beginning. Their fine filaments enter cracks and spread through young soils, releasing nutrients from minerals. In return, plants provide sugars made through photosynthesis. This partnership allows both groups to occupy places that would remain too poor for either alone. The relationship survives into modern ecosystems, where most land plants still depend on fungal partners around their roots. The first terrestrial communities are therefore built through cooperation as much as competition. Plants slow erosion, fungi accelerate chemical weathering, and microbes recycle dead material. Carbon dioxide is drawn from the atmosphere and stored in tissues and soils. Rivers carry altered sediments toward the sea. The arrival of life on land begins influencing global climate and ocean chemistry. Arthropods are among the earliest animals to follow. Their external skeletons provide support against gravity and reduce water loss. Jointed legs allow movement over uneven ground, while small body size makes it easier to shelter in damp cracks. Early millipede-like animals feed on decaying plant matter and microbial films. Arachnid relatives hunt smaller creatures. Later, insects diversify into many forms. Their arrival creates a new terrestrial food web. Dead plants no longer simply accumulate or decay through microbes alone. Animals break them apart, mix them into soil, and carry nutrients through the landscape. Predators follow herbivores and scavengers. Burrows create spaces where moisture remains during dry periods. Soil becomes a living habitat rather than a layer of weathered mineral. As plants evolve vascular tissue, they begin moving water more efficiently through their bodies. This allows greater height and wider leaves. Roots penetrate deeper, anchoring stems and drawing water from below the surface. Forests emerged during the Paleozoic era, first from relatively simple trees and later from diverse groups of ferns, horsetails, club mosses, and seed plants. Some rise to impressive heights in warm, humid lowlands. Their roots fracture rock and stabilize river banks. Their canopies create shade, reduce wind near the ground, and generate humid spaces beneath them. The continents develop layers tall vegetation above, shrubs and low plants below, roots and fungi within the soil, and countless small animals moving through litter. For the first time, large parts of Earth possess a three-dimensional ecosystem built on land. Photosynthesis in these forests removes carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. Much of the dead plant material falls into swamps where decay is slowed by waterlogged, oxygen-poor conditions. Buried beneath sediment, it becomes peat and eventually coal. The great coal deposits of the Carboniferous period preserve the remains of these ancient wetlands. Their formation removes carbon from the short-term atmosphere and allows oxygen levels to rise. In some intervals, atmospheric oxygen becomes considerably higher than it is in the modern world. The increase supports large arthropods, whose respiratory systems depend partly on oxygen moving through networks of air-filled tubes. Giant dragonfly relatives cross the forest air, and long millipede-like animals move over the ground. Their size is not caused by oxygen alone, but abundant oxygen helps make such bodies possible. Vertebrates approach land through a different path. Their story begins with fishes living in shallow water, floodplains, and seasonal pools. Some possess muscular fins with internal bones capable of supporting part of the body. Others develop lungs or lung-like organs that allow them to breathe air when water becomes stagnant and poor in oxygen. In environments that dry periodically, the ability to move through vegetation, push across mud, or reach another pool becomes valuable. These fishes do not leave the water in one sudden march. Over many generations, limbs become stronger, necks become more flexible, and the connection between skull and shoulder changes. Digits appear at the ends of limbs, although early forms may still spend most of their lives in water. The boundary between fish and tetrapod is a sequence of mixed bodies adapted to mixed environments. Early tetrapods remain tied to water for reproduction. Their eggs lack protection from drying, and their young often develop as aquatic larvae. Amphibian lineages spread through wetlands, river margins, and forests, feeding on the growing abundance of terrestrial arthropods. Some become large predators in swampy ecosystems. Their lungs, limbs, and sensory systems are suited to air, but their skin and reproduction keep them close to moisture. Land is open to them, yet it is not fully theirs. A decisive change arrives with the amniotic egg. Its membranes create a protected watery environment around the embryo, while a shell or outer covering reduces water loss and allows gas exchange. Reproduction no longer requires an exposed body of water. Animals carrying this system can lay eggs on land and move into drier habitats. The earliest amniotes divide into broad branches that later give rise to reptiles, birds, and mammals. Their skin reduces water loss more effectively. Their limbs support the body with greater strength, and their lungs become increasingly efficient. The continents now hold vertebrates that can complete their entire life cycle away from ponds and streams. The spread of forests also changes rivers. Roots stabilize banks and reduce the movement of sediment, allowing channels to become more winding and complex. Fallen wood redirects currents and creates pools. Floodplains hold water longer. The physical form of rivers begins to reflect biological engineering. At the same time, chemical weathering intensifies as roots and fungi penetrate rock. Nutrients reach the oceans, supporting marine productivity, While carbon dioxide continues to fall, climate responds to the growing influence of terrestrial life. Cooling and glaciation affect some regions, and ecosystems shift as continents move toward new latitudes. The living surface is now large enough to alter the planet that supports it. This age of expansion is repeatedly interrupted. Sea levels rise and fall. Volcanic eruptions release gases and ash. Ocean oxygen declines during some crises. Near the end of the Paleozoic, continents assemble into the supercontinent Pangaea. Interior regions become dry and strongly seasonal. Wetland forests contract, and seed plants better suited to drought spread across the land. Then an immense extinction closes the era. Massive volcanic activity in the region that becomes Siberia releases vast quantities of carbon dioxide and other gases. Rapid warming, ocean acidification, oxygen loss, and disruption of food webs combine into the most severe known mass extinction. Most marine species disappear, and terrestrial ecosystems collapse across broad regions. Forests retreat, rivers fill with eroded sediment, many amphibian and reptile lineages vanish. Yet life does not return to the sea or abandon the continents. Seeds, eggs, roots, lungs, soils, and terrestrial food webs persist among the survivors. The conquest of land has become irreversible. What begins as a thin film on damp stone now covers continents with forests, burrows, predators, and vertebrates capable of crossing dry ground. Earth's surface has gained a new living layer, one that will soon support the rise of dinosaurs, flowering plants, mammals, and eventually a species able to study the ancient traces beneath its feet. The Mesozoic era begins in the shadow of catastrophe. The great extinction at the end of the Paleozoic has removed most marine species and shattered ecosystems on land. Forests have collapsed across wide regions. Soils are unstable, and food webs are reduced to a small number of survivors. Yet extinction does not leave an empty planet for long. It leaves a planet filled with open ecological roles. Lineages that once lived at the margins now expand into habitats where competitors and predators have disappeared. During the long recovery, reptiles diversify rapidly. Their waterproof skin, efficient lungs, and amniotic eggs allow them to occupy dry interiors as well as coasts and river valleys. Among them, the archosaurs emerge, a broad group that later includes crocodilians, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs. Early dinosaurs are not immediately dominant. They begin as relatively small, lightly built animals living alongside many other reptile groups. Their upright limbs hold the body beneath them rather than spreading outward, making movement more efficient over long distances. Some run on 2 legs, while others use 4. Over millions of years, changing climates and repeated ecological disruption favour their expansion. By the Jurassic period, dinosaurs occupy nearly every major terrestrial habitat. Some become towering herbivores with long necks and immense bodies. Others develop armoured backs, horns, crests, or powerful jaws. Predatory dinosaurs move on strong hind limbs and use vision, balance, and grasping forelimbs to pursue prey. Their success does not come from a single superior feature. It comes from variation. Different lineages solve the problems of feeding, movement, defense, and reproduction in different ways, allowing dinosaurs to spread across the world as Pangaea begins to break apart. The fragmentation of the supercontinent reshapes the planet. Rifts open between land masses, volcanic activity increases, and new oceans form, coastlines lengthen, shallow seas spread into continental interiors, and isolated populations begin evolving along separate paths. A species divided by water no longer shares genes freely with its relatives elsewhere. Over time, each population adapts to local climates, plants, predators, and diseases. The breakup of Pangaea therefore creates not only new geography, but new evolutionary opportunity. Dinosaur communities in northern continents grow distinct from those in the south. Islands produce unusual small or large forms. Rising and falling seas repeatedly connect and separate habitats, creating cycles of dispersal and isolation. Above the land, pterosaurs master powered flight. Their wings are supported mainly by one greatly lengthened finger and covered by a membrane of skin and muscle. Some remain small and agile, while others reach enormous size and cross coastal skies with long, efficient wings. They are not dinosaurs, but close relatives within the archosaur lineage. In the seas, reptiles return to water in several forms. Ichthyosaurs develop streamlined bodies resembling those of fishes or dolphins. Plesiosaurs use broad flippers to move through marine environments. Mosasaurs later become powerful ocean predators. Evolution repeatedly reshapes land animals for life in water, showing that major transitions are not one-way movements. A lineage can leave the sea and, after millions of years, return with lungs, limbs, and a body transformed for swimming. Mammals also appear during the Mesozoic, descended from an older branch of amniotes known as synapsids. Their ancestors survive the Great Extinction in reduced numbers and gradually acquire traits associated with the mammalian body. Jaw bones become smaller and migrate toward the middle ear, improving hearing. Teeth become specialized for cutting, crushing, or grinding rather than repeating one simple shape. Hair provides insulation. Milk nourishes young. A more active metabolism supports movement in cooler conditions and during the night. Most early mammals remain small, often no larger than rodents, because dinosaurs dominate many large daytime roles. Yet small size is not failure. It allows mammals to hide in burrows, reproduce quickly, feed on insects and seeds, and survive in environments too narrow for giant reptiles. Some climb trees, some dig, some swim, and a few glide. The Mesozoic mammal world is more diverse than the old image of one timid nocturnal creature suggests. Feathers also transform part of the dinosaur lineage. They may begin as insulation or display structures before becoming useful in flight. Small theropod dinosaurs develop increasingly complex feathers on their arms and tails. Their skeletons become lighter, their forelimbs lengthen, and their bodies gain the balance needed for controlled movement through the air. Birds emerge within this branch. They are not merely descendants of dinosaurs in a distant sense. They are living dinosaurs, the only dinosaur lineage that survives the Great Extinction at the end of the era. Early birds share the skies with pterosaurs, and both groups explore different styles of flight. Forests below them are changing as well. For much of the Mesozoic, conifers, cycads, ginkgos, and ferns dominate plant communities. Then flowering plants appear and diversify during the Cretaceous period. Their flowers create new systems of reproduction, often using insects and other animals to carry pollen. Fruits protect seeds and encourage dispersal when animals feed on them. Leaves grow rapidly and support productive ecosystems. Pollinating insects diversify in response, and plants evolve colors, scents, shapes, and timing that improve their reproductive success. This partnership between plants and animals changes terrestrial food webs from the ground upward. Herbivorous dinosaurs encounter new foods. Insects gain new sources of nectar and pollen. Small mammals feed on fruits and seeds. Forest structure becomes more varied, with fast-growing flowering plants occupying disturbed ground, river margins, and open habitats. The Cretaceous world is warm, and sea levels are high. Shallow inland seas divide continents, while volcanic ridges displace water onto the land. No permanent ice sheets cover the poles, and forests extend into high latitudes. Dinosaurs live in regions that experience months of darkness each year, showing that they tolerate a broader range of conditions than their popular image suggests. Their growth, behavior, and physiology remain active areas of study, but many possess high metabolic rates and complex social behavior. Some build nests and care for young. Herds move across floodplains. Predators follow migrating prey. The world is neither static nor uniformly tropical. It contains deserts, forests, wetlands, mountains, polar woodlands, and broad coastal plains. Near the end of the Cretaceous, environmental stress is already increasing. Massive volcanic eruptions in the region that becomes India release lava and gases over a long interval. Climate and ocean chemistry fluctuate. Then a separate event arrives with extraordinary suddenness. An asteroid several kilometers wide strikes near the coast of the present-day Yucatan Peninsula. The impact releases energy on a planetary scale. Rock melts and vaporizes. Shock waves cross the region. Earthquakes, fires, and immense waves devastate nearby environments. Dust, soot, and sulfur. Barium particles rise into the atmosphere and spread around the world. Sunlight reaching the surface declines sharply. Photosynthesis slows on land and in the upper ocean. Plants die back. Plankton populations collapse, and food webs lose their foundation. The darkness may last for months, while the climatic disturbance continues much longer. Temperatures fall rapidly, then shift again as gases and altered ecosystems reshape the atmosphere. Large animals with high food demands are especially vulnerable. Non-avian dinosaurs disappear, along with pterosaurs, ammonites, and many marine reptiles. The extinction is selective rather than complete. Crocodilians survive in aquatic environments where food can persist as decaying material. Turtles endure. Small birds live through the crisis, perhaps aided by flexible diets and the ability to shelter or travel. Mammals survive in part because many are small, burrowing, and able to feed on insects, seeds, roots, or carrion. Their bodies require less food than those of giant dinosaurs, and some can remain inactive through periods of scarcity. No single trait guarantees survival, but a combination of size, diet, behavior, and habitat reduces risk. When sunlight returns and ecosystems begin rebuilding, the world has changed more profoundly than it first appears. The dinosaurs that dominated land for more than 100 million years are gone except for birds. Forests recover from spores, seeds, and surviving roots. Insects expand with the returning plants. Mammals emerge from hidden habitats and begin occupying roles left vacant by extinction. Some grow larger, some become swift runners, tree dwellers, predators, or grazers. Their later success is not the result of an inevitable ascent. It is made possible by survival through a crisis that removes the rulers of the previous age. The Mesozoic ends not because dinosaurs fail to adapt over time, but because a sudden planetary event changes the rules faster than most can follow. From that boundary onward, evolution begins again with a different set of survivors, and among them waits the distant lineage that will eventually produce primates. After the extinction that ends the age of non-avian dinosaurs, mammals enter a world of open habitats and unfinished ecosystems. Forests recover, flowering plants spread, and climates shift as continents continue moving toward their modern positions. Among the mammals living in trees, small primates develop grasping hands, forward-facing eyes, and flexible shoulders. These traits help them move along branches, judge distance, and handle food with precision. Their success begins not with intelligence in the human sense, but with bodies adapted to a layered forest. Over millions of years, primates divide into many lineages. Some remain small and nocturnal, others become monkeys, apes, and forms that leave only fragmentary fossils. Africa becomes especially important because it preserves a long sequence of changing environments in which early apes diversify. Forests expand and contract as rainfall patterns shift. Woodlands break into mosaics of trees, grass, lakes, and open ground. In this variable landscape, one branch of apes begins spending more time upright. Bipedal walking does not appear in a single step, and it does not immediately free the hands for technology. Early hominins still climb well and retain bodies suited to both trees and ground. Yet walking on two legs gradually becomes a central adaptation. It allows efficient travel between scattered food sources, raises the head above low vegetation, and changes the way hands can carry objects and infants. The pelvis, spine, knees, and feet are slowly reshaped. These changes bring costs, including difficult childbirth and stress on the lower back. But evolution preserves what works well enough in a changing environment. Several hominin species coexist. Human ancestry is not a ladder in which one form replaces another in a neat sequence. It is a branching pattern filled with overlapping populations. Australopithecines walk upright while retaining relatively small brains and strong climbing abilities. Some lineages develop massive jaws and teeth for heavy chewing, while others become more general in diet and behavior. Stone tools appear at least several million years ago, and the makers may include more than one species. A sharp stone edge allows access to meat, marrow, roots, wood, and plant fibers. Tool use is not unique to humans, but the repeated shaping of stone creates a durable tradition that can be learned, copied, and improved. Knowledge begins to survive outside the body. Members of the genus Homo develop larger brains, longer legs, and more efficient walking and running. Their bodies are increasingly suited to travel across open country. Fire eventually becomes another major tool. It offers warmth, protection, light, and a way to cook food. Cooking softens tough material and makes some nutrients easier to absorb. A shared fire also changes the structure of the day. Activity can continue after darkness, and groups gather around a stable center. The exact history of controlled fire remains debated because natural burning can resemble human use in ancient sites. But by the time later human species spread widely, fire is a repeated part of life. Homo erectus and related populations move beyond Africa long before modern humans appear. They reach parts of Eurasia and adapt to different climates, foods, and landscapes. Their descendants include several later human groups. Neanderthals develop across western Eurasia, where they survive cold and highly seasonal environments. Decisivans are known largely through genetic evidence and a small number of fossils, yet their ancestry spreads across a vast part of Asia. Other populations persist in island environments and develop distinctive bodies. The human family remains diverse until surprisingly late. Homo sapiens emerges in Africa through a population history that is itself branching and connected. Fossils and genetics indicate that modern human traits do not arise in one isolated place or one sudden transformation. Populations across Africa exchange genes and behaviors over long intervals. Faces become lighter in build, skulls become more rounded, and brains are reorganized rather than merely enlarged. Language leaves no fossil, but the anatomy and social behavior needed for complex communication develop gradually. Symbolic objects, pigments, ornaments, and carefully prepared tools reveal minds capable of shared meaning. A mark or bead can represent identity, memory, belonging, or belief only when a group understands the convention behind it. Culture becomes an inheritance system beside genetics. Homo sapiens expands beyond Africa in several movements, with one major dispersal beginning tens of thousands of years ago. These populations encounter Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps other humans. The The meetings are not only competitive, interbreeding occurs, and many living people carry small portions of DNA inherited from these vanished groups. Human history therefore begins with mixture rather than complete replacement. People reach Australia, spread through Eurasia, and later enter the Americas. Coastal routes, river valleys, grasslands, and ice-free corridors guide movement. Each migration demands knowledge of unfamiliar plants, animals, weather, and terrain, clothing, shelter, fire, boats, and social cooperation allow a tropical primate to live from deserts to Arctic margins. For most of this history, humans remain hunters, gatherers, fishers, and foragers. Their communities are often mobile, but mobility does not mean simplicity. They manage landscapes with fire, follow seasonal cycles, exchange materials over long distances, and preserve detailed ecological knowledge. Art appears on cave walls, carved objects, and decorated tools. The images are not a single universal code, yet they show that memory and imagination extend beyond immediate survival. The dead are sometimes buried with care. Music may arise through voice, rhythm, bone flutes, and percussion. Human groups become bound not only by kinship and food, but by stories, ritual, and shared identity. After the latest ice age, climates warm, and many environments become more predictable. In several regions, people begin cultivating plants and managing animals. Agriculture does not begin once or spread from one source. Wheat and barley are domesticated in parts of Southwest Asia. Rice is cultivated in East Asia. Maize develops in the Americas. Sorghum, millet, potatoes, yams, and other crops arise through different regional histories. Domestication is gradual. People select seeds from useful plants, protect favored species, and reshape landscapes. Animals such as dogs, sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, and llamas enter close relationships with human communities. Farming can support larger populations. But it also brings harder labour, narrower diets, infectious disease, and stronger inequality. Permanent settlements store food, attract trade, and create new forms of ownership. Villages grow into towns. Irrigation channels, walls, roads, and temples require organised labour. Writing appears in some societies as a way to track goods, taxes, land, ritual, and authority. States form where leaders coordinate resources and control force. Law, bureaucracy, and armies allow societies to operate on scales far beyond face-to-face trust. These systems create stability for some and oppression for others. Civilization is not a steady ascent toward improvement. It is an expanding capacity to coordinate, build, remember, and destroy. Cities connect distant environments through trade, metals, grain, timber, salt, cloth, animals, and ideas move along roads and sea routes. Empires rise by combining administration with violence. Religions and philosophies create moral systems that can unite strangers across large regions. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering develop through practical need and sustained curiosity. Calendars follow the sky. Surveying follows rivers and fields. Written records allow knowledge to accumulate across generations, though libraries, schools, and institutions remain vulnerable to war and collapse. The scientific revolution later changes the method by which nature is studied. Observation, measurement, experiment, and mathematical description become increasingly organized into a shared system. The Industrial Revolution then turns stored fossil energy into mechanical power on an unprecedented scale. Coal, oil, and gas contain energy captured by ancient life and buried through geological time. Machines release that energy within a few human generations. transport accelerates, cities expand, production rises, and medicine reduces many causes of early death: electricity. Telecommunications, computing, and spaceflight extend human influence still further. A species shaped by forests and grasslands begins altering atmospheric chemistry, river systems, coastlines, soils, and the distribution of life across the entire planet. This power creates a final contrast. Human beings remain animals, dependent on oxygen made by microbes and plants, on water circulated by climate, and on nutrients released from rock. Yet culture allows their actions to operate at geological scale. Languages, laws, markets, and technologies become forces that change forests, oceans, and climate. The history of humanity occupies only the thinnest edge of Earth's deep past. But within that edge, the planet acquires a species capable of reconstructing earlier worlds. Fossils, genes, minerals, and distant starlight become evidence. Through them, Earth's history begins to be remembered by one of its own living products. Earth's future begins in the present, where one species has become powerful enough to alter systems that once changed mainly through geology, climate, and evolution. Carbon buried over hundreds of millions of years is released into the atmosphere within a few centuries. Forests are cleared, rivers are redirected, and species are moved between continents at rates no natural migration can match. The planet remains far larger than any civilization. Yet human activity now affects the chemistry of the air, the temperature of the ocean, the timing of seasons, and the survival of entire lineages. This influence does not place humanity outside nature. It reveals how deeply one form of life can enter the machinery of the world that produced it. Carbon dioxide traps heat by absorbing radiation leaving the surface. As its concentration rises, the lower atmosphere and oceans warm, ice retreats, sea level increases, rainfall patterns shift, and extreme heat becomes more common. The exact course depends on choices made during a narrow interval of history. Emissions can rise, stabilize, or fall. Forests and soils can be protected or degraded. Energy systems can remain dependent on fossil carbon or move towards sources that do not add long-stored carbon to the air. Earth continues under every scenario, but the conditions inherited by future ecosystems and societies can differ greatly. Strong action cannot preserve a motionless climate, but it can reduce the speed and scale of disruption. Over longer spans, human structures begin to fade. Buildings crack, metals corrode, reservoirs fill with sediment, and roads disappear beneath vegetation or desert. Some materials endure as thin chemical signals in rock, plastics, concrete, altered carbon ratios, radioactive products, and the remains of domesticated animals may leave a recognizable boundary in future sediments. Whether this interval receives a formal geological name matters less than the physical fact that human activity is becoming legible in the planet's record. Civilization occupies only a moment, yet some of its effects may last for tens of thousands of years. Carbon dioxide released now can influence climate long after cities, languages, and nations have changed beyond recognition. If humanity survives and maintains complex knowledge, it may become capable of deliberate planetary stewardship. Energy from sunlight, wind, tides, and nuclear processes can support societies without continuous fossil fuel combustion. Agriculture can be redesigned around soil, water, and ecological limits. Technology can monitor forests, oceans, ice, and atmospheric change with increasing precision. None of this guarantees wisdom. Tools amplify intention, whether careful or destructive. The future of civilization depends on cooperation across generations that will never meet, beyond the human timescale. The continents continue their slow migration. Oceans open and close as plates move only a few centimeters each year. Africa presses northward into Europe, closing parts of the Mediterranean and raising new mountains. Australia moves towards Southeast Asia. The Atlantic may continue widening for a time, while subduction zones gradually reorganize its margins. No single map of the distant future is certain, because mantle convection is complex and new plate boundaries can form. Yet the continents are likely to gather again into another supercontinent after hundreds of millions of years. It may assemble around the Arctic, near the equator, or on the far side of the planet. Different models give it different names and shapes, but all reflect the same deep rhythm. Continents disperse, oceans grow, subduction begins, and land eventually reunites. A supercontinent changes climate on a global scale. Its interior lies far from ocean moisture and can become dry, hot, and strongly seasonal. Mountain belts alter winds and rainfall. Long coastlines vanish as landmasses collide, reducing shallow seas where marine diversity often flourishes. Volcanism may increase during assembly and breakup, releasing carbon dioxide and creating new habitats while destroying others. Life continues, but familiar ecosystems may not. Mammals, birds, flowering plants, insects, fungi, and microbes keep evolving if they survive near a crisis. New forms arise, while many present species disappear. Evolution has no obligation to preserve the recognizable. The distant Earth may remain biologically rich while containing almost nothing familiar beyond the broad chemistry of cells. The Sun also changes, though far more slowly than human climate. As hydrogen is converted into helium within its core, the core becomes denser and hotter. The Sun's energy output gradually rises, over hundreds of millions of years. This slow brightening increases the heat reaching Earth. The carbon cycle can compensate for a time. Warmer temperatures and stronger rainfall speed the weathering of silicate rocks, which removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Lower carbon dioxide weakens the greenhouse effect and partly offsets the brighter sun. This stabilizing feedback has helped maintain liquid water through much of Earth history, but it carries a hidden cost. Photosynthetic organisms require carbon dioxide. As weathering continues drawing it down, many plants become unable to survive. Plants using one style of photosynthesis are affected first, while those with more efficient carbon concentrating systems may persist longer. The loss of plants weakens food webs and reduces oxygen production. Large animals decline as the biosphere contracts. Microbial life, especially organisms adapted to heat, salt, and low oxygen, may endure far longer. The end of complex life is therefore likely to be gradual, unfolding through ecological simplification rather than one final instant. As solar brightness continues increasing, the climate moves toward conditions the carbon cycle can no longer regulate. Evaporation strengthens, and more water vapor enters the atmosphere. Water vapor is itself a greenhouse gas, so warming encourages further warming. The upper atmosphere becomes wetter, where sunlight can break water molecules apart. Light hydrogen escapes into space more easily than oxygen. Over immense time, the planet begins losing its ocean. The details depend on clouds, atmospheric circulation, geology, and the remaining distribution of water, but the direction becomes difficult to reverse. Seas shrink into isolated basins. Salt accumulates. Weathering slows as liquid water disappears. Plate tectonics may weaken if the interior cools and water becomes less available to soften rock, though the exact timing and cause of its eventual end remain uncertain. Volcanism declines. The cycling of carbon between mantle, crust, ocean, and atmosphere becomes less effective. Earth's long habitability has always depended on motion, and as that motion fades, the surface becomes harder to regulate. The last life may survive below ground, where water remains in pores and chemical reactions continue between rock and fluid. Microbes can live without sunlight and tolerate conditions fatal to complex organisms. Their refuge may persist after the surface has become barren. Eventually, even these environments grow too hot or too dry. The biosphere that begins with microscopic cells may end with microscopic cells, returning to the small scale from which it first emerged. No witness is required for this ending. It occurs as a physical transition, one more change in a planet that has never remained still. Farther ahead, the Sun exhausts much of the hydrogen in its core and expands into a red giant. Its outer layers grow outward while its luminosity increases enormously. Long before the solar surface reaches Earth's present orbit, the planet is already lifeless and scorched. The oceans are gone, the atmosphere is altered or largely lost, and the crust is heated beyond any biological limit. Whether the expanding Sun ultimately engulfs Earth depends on the balance between solar mass loss, which allows the orbit to widen, and tidal interactions, which can draw the planet inward. Models differ in detail, but survival as a recognizable world offers no escape from destruction. Earth may be swallowed, or it may remain as a burned remnant orbiting beyond the Sun's expanded edge. In either case, the living planet has ended. The Moon's orbit and the shapes of the other planets also change as the Sun sheds mass into space. The solar system enters a quieter age around a white dwarf, the dense core left after the outer layers disperse. Yet Earth's materials do not vanish from the universe. Atoms once held in oceans, cells, mountains, and cities remain part of cosmic matter. Some may be scattered by the Sun's final changes. Others may stay bound within a dead planet. The calcium in ancient shells, the iron in blood, and the carbon in forests all originate in older stars, and they continue beyond the world that briefly arranged them into life. Earth's complete history is therefore not a straight path toward humanity, nor a story designed to preserve any one form. It is a sequence of thresholds: dust becoming planet, chemistry becoming life, cells becoming bodies, bodies becoming ecosystems, and one species becoming conscious of deep time. Every threshold is temporary, yet none is meaningless. For a finite interval, Earth carries oceans beneath sunlight and living systems capable of memory. That interval is neither eternal nor small. It stretches across billions of years, long enough for stone to become soil, fins to become limbs, and microbial chemistry to become thought. The distant future closes that interval, but it cannot erase that it occurred.